Hey guys, and welcome to the first episode of CrewAI Noob vs Pro. And in this series, I'm going to share with you some of the most common mistakes that I see beginner CrewAI developers make, how to avoid those problems, and how you can start to build crews like a pro. Also, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Brandon. I'm a software developer at CrewAI, and I also have a free Skool community with over 4,000 AI developers where I've helped hundreds of them build better crews using everything that I learned as a CrewAI developer. And in this first episode, we're going to cover one of the most common mistakes that I see, which I call the God task. And by the end of this episode, you're going to learn what is the God task, why it's such a problem, and how you can avoid it and build much better crews. And to help make everything we're going to learn today crystal clear, I've actually built 2 demo crews for you. In the first demo, we're going to show the Noob Crew that has the God task, so you're going to see all the problems it causes in action. And in the second demo, I'm going to show off the Pro Crew where we've completely fixed everything, got rid of the God task, so you can see how much better this Pro Crew performs. I cannot wait to show you guys the results and show you these demos in actions, but enough talking, let's go ahead and dive into the rest of the video. Oh, and before I forget, if you would like me to analyze and improve your crews right here on this channel, feel free to go ahead and shoot them over to me at brandon@crewai.com. I cannot wait to see what you guys are working on and how I can help improve. And second, if you would like to meet other like-minded AI developers and get some additional support, you're gonna love the free Skool community I put together for you guys called the AI Developer Accelerator. We have over 4,000 members. We have weekly free coaching calls where you get to hop on a call with me and other developers where we get to work on and help improve whatever you're working on. So can't wait to see you over in the community. More information down in the description below. But enough of that, let's go ahead and hop right back to the rest of the video. All right, so now it's time to dive into the nitty-gritty and actually look at what is a God task, why it's a problem, the key signs of a God task so you can identify them in your own crews, and then finally, how to go off and fix these. And then after we cover all the basics, we're gonna hop over and actually analyze those 2 demo crews that I was talking about earlier, the Noob Crew where we have the problem, and then the Pro Crew where we actually implement everything that we're gonna cover in here with the solution and see how you can actually fix the crew. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into these one at a time so that we're on the same page. Okay, so first off, what the heck is a God crew? So the key thing of a God crew is that it's a single task that's just trying to do way too much. At first, it might look pretty simple, such as like, oh, go off and perform this task. But really, when you dig deeper into that task, you'll realize that there's actually like 10 things going on underneath. So it's just doing way too much, and this causes a bunch of problems, such as whenever you're actually trying to execute the task, you'll notice that the agents get lost. They lose focus. They don't really follow what you're trying to tell them to do. These agents, they're coming super far. They're getting way smarter, but they're still not like geniuses yet. So they need things to be broken down into small tasks so that they can understand exactly what they need to do. They need clarity and simplicity. Next, what you'll also notice is in these God tasks, because there's really a bunch of subtasks happening underneath, the agent will often go off and skip certain tasks. So, it might have 10 smaller tasks and it'll skip item 4 and 6. Even though you've clearly told it, do this, it won't do it. And it's just because the agent's trying to juggle too much and loses context of what actions it needs to be performing in this moment. And then finally, one of the other things you'll notice is the results of this task, they're not going to be what you would expect. Because it's accidentally skipped a step or 2 here and there, it's lost focus of what it's trying to do, it won't give you the expected results that you would expect this task to perform. So that's some of the major problems. And because at the end of the day, we just want our tasks inside of our crews to work as expected. So what the heck are a few key signs of a God task? So there's really 4, and hopefully as you're going and working on your own crews, you can start to identify, oh yeah, that is a God task, and I need to, step 1's identifying it, and step 2 is going off and fixing it. So here are the 4 major identifiers of a God task. So first thing, too many tasks. Ideally, you want to keep your task, you want to keep the subtasks within it. And this all makes sense when you go look at the demo crew together, but you'll notice that there's too many tasks in a task. So what's happening is there's 10 subtasks, and that's just way too much complexity for our agents to take care of. Also, it's too broad. Task should be focused on performing one objective. And when you actually look at some of these God tasks, it's like, oh, research this, analyze this, make a report, and also do this. So it's just it's doing way too much work. And then finally, it's actually kind of confusing. That's another one. Like if you actually go through and read your task and pretend you just handed it off to someone else, you might notice like, yeah, it's actually not clear what I should be doing. Or, oh, it does make sense, but if I was to give it to a fifth grader, a like hyper genius fifth grader, they wouldn't understand what all to do and they might skip something. And then finally, it's hard to debug. And what I mean by that is after a task is done running and you look at the results of that task, you might see like, oh, that's weird. It didn't do what I expected it to do. You know, like the results I'm getting, it's not what I told it to do. So you're kind of stuck in this weird state of like, I told it what to do, but I'm not getting the results. So it's hard to debug and figure out why the heck your task isn't working. And the root issue is just there's too much going on. Okay, so now that we've talked about everything else, how the heck do we fix these God tasks? So it really comes down to 3 key things that you're going to see later on when we analyze the Pro Crew together in just a second. All right, so first things first, what we need to do is ultimately break up this monster God task into a bunch of small, hyper clear tasks where we have clear inputs and outputs for each task. So that's kind of 1 and 2 put together. Break up and make inputs and outputs very clear. And then finally, we're going to use the context property on a task. And what that's going to allow us to do is go, hey, we now, instead of having one monster task, which is going off researching, doing all sorts of stuff, and then pass that result over to the next crew, what we can do is actually break things up into like research this, research this, research this, into 3 smaller tasks. And we can combine the output of all 3 of those tasks together using context and pass the result of all 3 of those small tasks over to the next. And you're going to see exactly how to do this inside of Crews in just a second, but this is ultimately what we have to do. So enough talking about hypotheticals. Let's actually go ahead and dive in and start looking at the Noob Crew so you can see the God task in action and all the issues that it's going to cause. All right, guys, so welcome to our first crew, which is going to be the Noob Research Crew. And in this crew, I'm going to show you exactly the God task in action, and we're going to cover, how it covers all the key identifiers that we talked about earlier. You're going to see it in action and see how it just is not performing how we would expect it to. And also, just to help you guys out even more, you're going to be able to download this Noob Crew and the Pro Crew completely for free. I'll have a link to it down in the description below so that you can go off and use it yourself if you'd like to. Okay, so what are we trying to do? So for this Noob Crew, we're ultimately trying to go off and do a quick research analysis, and really it's a comparison. So we want to compare 2 different things. In this case, we want to compare the Apple Watch Ultra to the new Garmin Fenix 9. These are just smartwatches, and what we're trying to do is like, hey, tell me what is the best health wearable in 2024 to train for a marathon. So it's going to compare item 1 to item 2 against our goal, and it's going to go, oh, actually, after researching the internet, item 1 is better. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. So pretty straightforward. And this crew is going to be broken into 1 task and 1 agent. So you can see down here, we have 1 agent who's our researcher. This researcher has 3 major tools. Tool 1 is Serper, which is a web scraping tool to go off and get a brief snippet from a bunch of different websites. Tavily is another web searching tool that will go off and get a little bit more information compared to Serper. And then finally, we are going to use a customized version of this search tool that's specifically going to look at Reddit. That way we're, looking and exploring a bunch of different sources on the internet to help us find out in our comparison, which is the better item. Great. So what we have next is we have a single task. This task is a comparison task, and this is where you're going to see all of the God task in action. So let's go ahead and dive into this task so you can see it in action. So, all right, at this point that our whole goal is to compare item 1 against item 2 in our goal. So we're going to say, hey, go off, conduct a thorough comparison between item 1 and 2 with the goal of blank. So just a quick reminder, these goals right here, we're going to be passed in. So item 1, item 2, and goal, these are all going to get passed in right here. So it'll actually read like a real sentence. Compare Apple Watch Ultra against the Garmin and tell me which one's the better one for running a marathon. Now here is where things start to kind of unravel and become a God task. So the high level overview is like, hey, search the internet with this tool, search the internet with this tool, and then finally search the internet with this tool. So that's already 3 tasks. And then finally, at the end, after you've researched everything using all those tools, go off and put a report. But if you dig deeper, so that's 4 all in all. 1, 2, 3, and then task 4. So that's 4 tasks. So we're already kind of getting like, this is a lot to do for a single task. But if you dive even deeper, inside of each research task, we're doing 3 additional, actions, such as for the Serper tool, go off and independently look at item 1 for achieving the goal. look at item 2 for achieving the goal, and then eventually do a direct comparison for comparing item 1 to item 2. So this is actually, if you dig deeper, what's happening, it's like, okay, I'm going to perform 3 searches here, another 3 searches here, another 3 searches here, and then finally I'm going to generate a report. So all in all, we have 10 actions that we're asking our agent to go off and take, which is a ton of work for our agents to keep up with. And what you'll see in the end, hey, just give me a nice looking markdown report that gives me the final, that shows off all your findings, and it also tells me, your final recommendation. I also want to see links for everything. So there's just a lot that this agent has to keep up with as it's going off and executing this comparison task. The agent, it's pretty straightforward. Hey, you're just a senior researcher, and here's your goal. Go off and do some critical researching and actually let us know what you find out based on the specific goals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kick off this crew and hop over to Agent Ops so you can see exactly what's going on, and we can start to identify some of the core problems that we've talked about earlier, such as skipping steps and incomplete results. So let's go ahead and hop over. I'm going to run the crew for you guys real fast and show you the results over in Agent Ops. So just 1 second. All right, guys. So welcome over to Agent Ops. This is where we can drill down into our crew execution and see exactly what happened, what tool calls were made, what LLM calls were made over and over and over again. So it's super easy to see exact breakdown of what happened. And just in case you haven't used Agent Ops before, super easy to set up inside of CrewAI. Just in the side of your base crew, like right in the root class, you're just going to say Agent Ops init, pass in your API key, and you're good to go. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let me show you what went down when we executed this crew. So first off, we were using GPT 4.0 mini. So you can see all in all, this costs less than a penny to go off and do our comparison, which is crazy that it's cheap nowadays. We're using the latest version of CrewAI, and let's scroll down so I can show you exactly some of the symptoms that we talked about earlier that would arise as of using the God task. So quick breakdown, you should remember that inside of our task, we were going to search with Serper, then with Tavily, then we were going to do a Reddit search. And for each tool, we should do 3 searches. So let's hop back over to Agent Ops so we can see that it did not perform as we would expect. So right out the gate, and I'll zoom in for you guys, it's going to go off and make a call saying like, hey, you are a senior researcher. Your goal is to go off and search the internet. You're trying to compare the Ultra Watch 2 to this watch for finding the best one to use for training a marathon. Cool. So that's exactly what we'd expect. But now, once we've given it the instructions, it's up to the agent to go off and start making tool calls and start putting together a report. So you can see our first tool call is going to be one to search the internet. And that's basically Serper. So just know that is Serper in action. Then we're going to have another tool call, search the internet again. That's another Serper call. Then we're going to do another Serper call. So it's working so far, but this is when things start to fall apart. So now that we've kind of searched everything, we're now going to start going over to using Tavily. So you can see we did one Tavily search here. We did another Tavily search. And then we hopped over to Reddit. So that means we definitely skipped out on one tool call. So that's not what was supposed to happen. Like it skipped a major step for us. And then finally it did another Reddit search. So it skipped out on a total of 2 searches, one Reddit and one Tavily. So all in all, we're not getting all the data that we requested. So even though it did do the final output, we can go ahead and see. I'll scroll down and show it to you guys. So in the final output, you can see, I'll just scroll down to the very bottom. You can see in our final output, it goes cool. So here is the final answer. When it comes to comparing these 2 devices, here's the results I've gathered. So Apple Watch Ultra, here's an overview of it. When it comes to the Garmin, here's a quick overview of it. And then finally, when it comes to the comparison, it looks like it says the Garmin watch is better for battery life, a few other reasons, and here's its final recommendation. So it does also have, it's supposed to have further links, but it didn't do it. So all in all, it's just like there was too much of the task, too many things going on, and the agent just couldn't handle it all. So now that you can clearly see that like it didn't do what we expected it to do, and you can see it actually skipped out on steps, you can see that that's exactly what are a few of the side effects of the God task. And all in all, you just don't get what you would expect. So now that you've seen a Noob Crew and the problems that come with it, let's hop back over to our Pro Crew, where I've completely restructured everything to do the exact same objective, but in a much better structure. So let's go ahead and hop over to our Pro Crew to see it in action. All right, guys, so welcome over to the Pro Crew demo, where we've restructured the entire crew to be much simpler and work a lot more effectively. And just as a quick recap of how we go off and fix a God task before showing it to you, I just want to quick recap. We need to do 3 things. First, just break everything up into smaller tasks. So instead of having one massive task, chunk it up into smaller tasks. And then finally, we just want to make sure each of the new tasks we create has a hyper clear input and super clear output. And then finally, we're going to start using context of a task strategically. So you're going to see all of this in action. So let me show you what we did, quick visual first, and then I'm going to hop you over to the actual crew changes so it makes sense when we start looking at the code. So in the past, whenever we were running the crew, it was just, here's the task, it's massive, good luck, you got it. And as you saw, it did not work. So the way we've restructured it following our rules, first, we've broken it up into a bunch of smaller tasks. So you can see we've taken this first task, which is just one, and we've broken it up into 4 smaller tasks. Each one of these boxes is a task. So one task is go off and use Serper. The next task is go off and search with Tavily. The next is go off and search with Reddit. And then finally, once you've done all the research, now let's put all of that together and generate one report. So as you can see, 4 tasks, and each task is going to be super clear on what it needs to do. And finally, there's a few extra things that we're going to do that we can use to level up as a pro CrewAI developer. So the first one is we're going to use context. And the important thing to note when it comes to context is when it comes to working on tasks, you get to say what inputs from previous task do you want to get passed into this current task. So normally the way tasks work inside of CrewAI is a task, you run a task, it gets an output, that output is passed over to the next task. So it just gets passed over from one to the next, left to right. But using context, you have the option to overwrite that natural feature and change it. So in this case, what we're going to say is, hey, instead of just getting the context from the task right before this, I actually want you to look at the output of all 3 of these tasks. And that's exactly what we want to happen in our case, because we want to aggregate the results from all 3 of these search tasks into our final report. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, what we're also going to do to level up is instead of executing each one of these tasks one at a time, we're going to execute these tasks asynchronously. So all 3 of them are going to run at the same time, and it's just going to speed up our crew. And you'll see this later when we actually go off and run it. This crew is going to be way faster. So hopefully that all makes sense. And what we're going to do next is let's go ahead and hop over to our crew so you can see the code in action. So let's cover the task. So as you saw back in our diagram, we now have 4 different tasks: our Serper, our Tavily, and our Reddit search. So these are our 3 search tasks. And then we have our final comparison task. So those are the 4 new tasks that we've broken it up into. And then finally, what you'll also notice at the top of the file is we've actually split up our agents just to be even more clear. So now we have 2 agents. As always, we had a research agent in the previous one. We have a research agent in the new one. The only additional agent is this reporting agent. And the reporting agent is going to be the one who goes off and writes the report. And this agent, as you can see, will basically run this task. Cool. So hopefully that makes sense. So now let's actually dive in to actually see how we've restructured our task to be way more effective and actually to start using some of the newer features we talked about. So let's go ahead and look at Serper first so you can see this in action. So it is your job when using the Serper tool to go off and compare the items using this developer tool to gather relevant articles. And then it's the exact same thing that we had in the original task. We've just broken the instructions out into smaller tasks. So, hey, first independently search it, independently search the next one, and then finally compare them. And then, hey, your result should be a markdown file that's easy to read, and the title of it needs to be Serper Search Report. The reason why is I just wanted a easy way for us to clearly identify, like, oh yeah, that is the search results from Serper. And then finally what we're going to do is you're going to be able to see at the end with the expected output, you're going to see that it oh, sorry, my cursor is going to look crazy on me, but you can see the final expected output, now that we want hyper clear outputs, it needs to be an aggregated summary of everything you just looked at and it needs to have URLs. So what's going to be nice is the result of this task is just going to be one big, large markdown file with everything we need. And the result of it is going to get passed over to our report in just a second. And you'll see how we're going to do that. The only other important thing that you need to know is we are going to set up async execution to true. And what that means is this task is going to run in parallel with other tasks. All right, so let's keep looking. So Tavly is also going to be the exact same thing. The only thing different is we specify you're going to use this tool. Everything else is identical. Same for Reddit. Go off and use this tool and do this exact same thing. So as you can see, there's a little bit of redundancy, but these tasks are so hyper clear. And at max, there really is like 3 or 4 subtasks, which is go search, 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 and put everything you find into a report. So all in all, this is much more condensed, and there's agents really can handle 3 or 4 tasks. Anything past that, they kind of blow up. So this is kind of like a rule of thumb. Now, finally, what we're going to do is in our last task, we're going to say, great, I'm going to need you to compile all the research information from these different tools. And what you're going to notice is I want you to make everything into a markdown file and put the final recommendation with links and resources. So this was exactly what we mentioned in the God task, except now it's just brought over here. Now, this is a part that is important, so please pay attention when it comes to context. So context is our way of saying, hey, I want to overwrite the default features of CrewAI, and instead of just listening for the previous task that finished, I actually want to not just look at those results, I want to specifically look at multiple task results. So in this case, I want to look at the result of the SERPer task, I want to look at the result of the Tavly task, and I want to look at the result of the Reddit search task. And you'll actually see this in action whenever we hop back over to Agent Ops. So hopefully this all makes sense now. I will just show you the agents as well. You know, same thing. The researcher basically is like, hey, you're going to go off and research. And then the reporting is like, hey, you're just generating a report on these 2 items with this goal. So overall, we're just getting a little bit more structured, a little bit more clear, and breaking things up into smaller subtasks. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and run this crew for you guys, and we're going to hop back over to Agent Ops so you can see the result of this crew, and you can see exactly how it hit everything that it was supposed to do, and it's performing a lot better. So let's go ahead and hop back over to Agent Ops after I run this task for you guys real fast. All right, guys, so I just kicked off the Pro crew, and here are the results inside of Agent Ops. So what I want to show you inside of this one is how the structure of the crew run is differently, because this graph definitely looks different than our previous one. So in our previous one, it was pretty synchronous. So it was like, think about something, call a tool, think about something, call a tool. And in our new one, because we're doing asynchronous task calls, we're actually running the SERPer, Tavly, and Reddit searches all in parallel. So that's why things are getting kicked off in 3s. So let me show you exactly what's happening in here. And then at the end, we'll cover the results so you can see everything in action. So what you'll notice is we do make the official 9 tool calls to the proper places. So 3 for SERPer, 3 for Tavly, and 3 for Reddit. So let me just show you. So you can see this one is with SERPer. I'll zoom in just a little bit more. Sorry about that. So you can see the first one was with SERPer. The next one's Tavly. Then we go to another it goes SERPer, Reddit, then Tavly. And then if you keep going, then we now have 2 for SERPer. Now we have 2 for Tavly. We have 3 for SERPer. We now have 2 for Reddit. Then we now have 3 for Tavly, and then we have 3 for Reddit. So all in all, we have 3 for each, which is exactly what we were shooting for. Okay, so now that we've covered exactly, that it did do what it was expected to do, now that we refactored everything, now that we're pro CrewAI users, let me show you what happens in our final tool call, where we're actually going off into the reporting analyst, whose job is to go off and execute the current task, which is compiling all the research from these different tools. So what I want to show you inside of this is you can see it starts to go off and actually make basically specific calls, and we're passing it in. And sometimes Agent Ops breaks. I have no idea why their tool breaks. So we have to go to the chat viewer so you can actually see it in action. So yeah, I apologize. Their tool just kind of breaks sometimes, but you can see current task. We now have the ability to look at the different context that we passed in. So we would expect task 1 to be SERPer, task 2 to be Tavly, and task 3 to be Reddit. And we'd expect the outputs of all those tasks to get passed in for us to analyze and go off and generate a report. And that's exactly what happens. So here's the context that you're working with. Here's the SERPer search report. So you can see in here, Apple Watch findings, Garmin findings, comparison findings. We now hop over to Tavly, and you can see it has the exact same thing. And then finally, we have Reddit, exact same thing. And then finally, now that it has all of those pieces of information, it can go off and generate its final response, where it generates its comprehensive report. So here's exactly what it does. Here's my comprehensive report of Apple Watch Ultra versus Garmin for marathon chaining in 2024. So here's what it aggregated from all those outputs of the previous task for the Apple Watch. Here's the key findings for Garmin, and its final recommendation was the Garmin Fenix 9. And, basically they're both great, but, this one's the best. And then what's cool is now it actually goes off and suggests links to us. And it is important to go ahead and mention that in the previous example, this broke. So as you saw in the last time, it skipped task, it didn't do the expected output, but now that we've broken everything up into very clear roles and responsibilities and smaller tasks, things are working properly. So, just a quick recap, if your crews are not working as expected, you might be putting way too much information into each task. So definitely please follow everything we've learned here in these God Task episode so that you will now be able to break apart your crews into smaller tasks and level up as a CrewAI developer. But yeah, also, if you guys have any questions about anything that I did in this video today, please drop a comment down below. Want to clear this up, and I have a lot more of these videos planned for you guys. So that's a wrap for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of CrewAI Noob vs. Pro. I have a bunch more of these coming out, and just 2 quick reminders. If you would like me to analyze your crews and showcase them right here on this channel, feel free to go ahead and shoot them over to me at brandon@crewai.com. And second, if you would like to join a free Skool community with a bunch of like-minded AI developers and get access to the free weekly coaching calls, you'll definitely want to check out the AI Developer Accelerator. I have a link to it down in the description below. But outside of that, if you're looking for even more AI content, I have a ton of videos for you guys right in front of this channel from CrewAI, LangChain, and a bunch of other full stack tutorials. So you definitely want to check those out and watch whatever video is getting recommended right now. But enough of that, can't wait to see you guys in the next video. And until then, see ya.